Have you ever looked back at your life and realized it was built by a liar? I have. He took everything from me. But he made one mistake. He priced my destruction at $95,000. He never expected I would use that exact sum to buy his downfall. They thought I was buried. They did not know I was a seed. My name is Alara Mason. For the last decade, my life was a masterpiece of curated perfection. On paper, I was 35, a senior brand strategist at Stratus Creative Solutions, a respectable mid-sized consulting firm in Austin. I was good at my job. I knew how to find the soul of a dying product and make people believe in it. But in the circles we moved in, my talent was merely a charming anecdote. My primary identity, the one that mattered, was being Liam's wife. We lived in a stunning, modern glass house perched in the hills, a marvel of architecture that blurred the line between the lush Texas landscape and our living room. It was featured in magazines. But living in a glass house means you are always on display. Our life was a performance. We hosted weekend dinner parties where the wine was always expensive, the conversation was always about disruptive technology, and the ambiance was always warm, inviting, and utterly suffocating. We were the power couple. He was the power. I was the couple. Liam, my husband, the founder of Apex Sustainability Ventures. The media called him a genius, the charismatic visionary behind $1 billion green energy fund that was, quite literally, saving the world. He was handsome, ambitious, and possessed a frictionless charm that made investors open their wallets and politicians clear their schedules. He treated me, in public, like a treasure. In private, he was affectionate, his praise a warm blanket I wrapped myself in, ignoring the fact that it often felt heavy, almost smothering. I believed, truly believed, that he adored me. And then there was Serena, my cousin. She was the permanent, fragile shadow in our perfect home. Her parents had died when she was young, and my family, mostly me, had taken her in. I had spent my entire life protecting her, insulating her from the world. She was quiet, deeply grateful, and seemed to tremble on the verge of apologizing for simply existing. When Liam offered her a job as his special executive assistant, I thought it was the kindest gesture in the world. It gave her purpose, a place. She lived with us, of course. Where else would she go? I treated her like a sister, defending her small mistakes and celebrating her minor victories. I was her shield. The first cracks in the facade were so small I could barely see them. They started with money. Liam, a man who moved millions before breakfast, suddenly became agitated over the smallest household expenditures. The catering bill for one of his own investor parties was excessive. A dress I bought for a gala was frivolous. Alara, especially right now. Right now, what's happening right now? I'd ask. Just restructuring, he would say, flashing that smile that melted boardrooms. It's complex. Don't worry your pretty head about it. Then came the papers. He would bring them to me late at night, stacks of documents bound in leather. When I was already tired, my guard down. Honey, I just need your signature on these financial proxies, he'd murmur, rubbing my shoulders. Just routine investment restructuring. I was a brand strategist. He was the financial titan. I signed over my authority, my rights, and my name. One page at a time, believing I was being a supportive partner. The tension tightened. Our 10th anniversary was supposed to be our night. I had booked a table at a small, exclusive restaurant we both loved, an hour before we were set to leave. Serena knocked on our bedroom door, her eyes wide and flooded with tears. She was twisting her hands, her voice cracking. Ilara, Liam, I did something terrible, she whispered. I completely forgot about the time difference. I scheduled Liam for a critical call with the Zurich investors. Tonight, in 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. I've ruined everything. Liam sighed, a perfect performance of the burdened genius. Damn it. Serena, fine. He looked at me, his face a mask of regret. Darling, this is unavoidable. It's the final push for the new fund. We'll celebrate next week, I promise. He kissed my forehead. The dinner was canceled. Later that night, I found myself comforting Serena in the kitchen, rubbing her back as she sobbed, telling her it was an honest mistake. The entire time, a cold, acidic resentment burned in my stomach, and I felt deeply guilty for it. How could I be angry at her? She was just trying to help. My mind kept drifting to my Uncle Arthur. He had passed away 6 months prior. Arthur was the family pariah, a once brilliant financial journalist who had been disgraced, fired for a story that got too close to someone powerful. He'd watched Liam's rise with a cynical eye. The last time I'd seen him, his hands trembled from his illness, but his gaze was sharp. Things that look too green are usually covering a pile of red mud. Ilara, he'd rasped, grabbing my arm. You be careful. That husband of yours, he's too smooth. I had pulled my arm away, offended. He's doing good in the world, Uncle. You just can't stand to see anyone succeed. I dismissed it as the bitter rambling of a failed man. His words now felt like a stone in my gut. The pressure peaked last week. It was the most bizarre fixation. A small, worthless plot of land in rural Virginia. I had inherited it from my mother. It was less than an acre, with nothing on it but the concrete shell of an old, derelict pump station. It held sentimental value, nothing more. Liam, who had never cared about my modest inheritance, suddenly became obsessed. Ilara, we need to sell that Virginia property, he said one evening, his tone deceptively casual as he scrolled through his tablet. What? Why, it's just land. Liam, it's worth nothing. It's complicating our tax profile, he said, not looking up. It's a messy asset from your mother's estate. We need to liquidate it, clean up the books. It's just better for both of us. He slid a sales agreement across the polished marble island. Just sign it. I've already got a buyer lined up. It'll be quick. I stared at the paper. A cold, unfamiliar feeling prickled my skin. It wasn't confusion. It was fear. For the first time in my marriage, I didn't want to sign. The client meeting in San Antonio had been canceled at the last minute. A junior associate had emailed me, citing a family emergency for their CEO. It meant I was back in Austin by 3 in the afternoon, hours earlier than I was expected. The iron gates of our property slid open silently, and I drove up the long, winding driveway, appreciating the quiet beauty of the hills. The house, all glass and sharp angles, looked peaceful against the bright blue Texas sky. But the silence was a lie. As soon as I stepped out of my car, I heard it. Music. It was classical. Vivaldi, I thought. But it was deafening, blasting from the house with a frantic, manic energy that felt wrong. Liam hated classical music. I unlocked the front door, and the sound physically hit me. It was coming from the West Wing, from his office. My first thought was that a speaker had malfunctioned. I walked across the vast, polished concrete floor, my footsteps echoing under the soaring violins. Liam, I called out, but the music consumed my voice. I reached his office. The door, a massive slab of reclaimed oak that he always kept locked, was open. Just a crack. The music was pouring through the gap, pulsing with a terrible energy. I pushed it open gently. The scene in front of me wasn't what I expected. I hadn't been suspicious of an affair. Not really. I would have expected to find them in our bedroom. This was worse. They weren't on a couch. They were standing in front of Liam's 80-inch data wall, the one he used for market projections. But it wasn't showing stocks. It was a complex, glowing diagram of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and wire transfers. Names I didn't recognize. Banks in the Cayman Islands, in Zurich, in Panama, and in the center of it all, bathed in the blue light of the monitor, were Liam and Serena. Serena was wearing my favorite silk robe, the cream-colored one I had bought in Paris. Her hair was down, and she looked nothing like the mousy, dependent girl I had protected. She looked feral. She had her arms wrapped around Liam's neck, and she was kissing him. Not a tender kiss, but a hungry, possessive one. I must have frozen, my hand still on the door. They hadn't heard me. The music was too loud. Serena pulled back slightly, her lips still brushing his. Her voice, when she spoke, cut through the violins with a terrifying clarity I had never heard before. "Are you sure she'll sign?" Liam laughed. It was a sound I knew, but it was hollow, stripped of all its charm. "She loves you," he said, his hand sliding down the silk of my robe, over her back. "She trusts you. She'll trust me too. As soon as that Virginia land is transferred, we're safe." My body went cold before my mind caught up. The Virginia land, the papers, the fabricated urgency. It was all a lie. My hand, slick with a sudden icy sweat, lost its grip on my phone. It hit the marble entryway of his office with a sound that was obscene, a sharp, shattering crack that sliced through the music and hung in the air. They ripped apart. They spun around. I will never forget their faces in that split second. It was not guilt. It was not shame. It was not even the animal panic of being caught. It was, after the initial shock, a cold, profound, and undeniable relief. The show was over. The curtain had fallen. They were tired of pretending. Serena recovered first. The fragile, weeping girl I had known my entire life was gone, replaced by a stranger with eyes like polished stone. She straightened the lapel of my robe. She was the brain. I saw it instantly. She was the one behind the complex ledgers, the one who understood that glowing screen. She had been playing me, all of us, for years. "You're home," she said. Her voice was flat, without a single tremor of remorse. "Good. We can accelerate things." I looked at Liam, my husband, the man I had loved, the man I had built my life around. He said nothing. He didn't rush to explain. He didn't stammer or apologize. He simply watched me, his expression hardening, his mind visibly calculating, shifting from husband to risk manager. He smoothed the front of his shirt. He turned to the wall and, with a click of a mouse, the music died, plunging the room into a horrifying, sterile silence. "Elara," he said, and his voice was the one he used with hostile board members. It was calm, measured, and utterly devoid of love. "You saw what you shouldn't have. Now, you have to cooperate. For your own good." I didn't flinch. I just stared at him, at both of them, the entire architecture of my life collapsing in on itself. Liam didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward me. He simply picked up his phone from the desk, his thumb moving with practiced, impersonal speed. "Security," he said into the phone. "My office, immediately. Internal security, not the police." Within 2 minutes, 2 men in identical black suits were at the door. They were polite, their faces blank, their bodies blocking the exit. They were the same men who checked guest lists at our parties. "Ms. Mason," one of them said, not meeting my eyes, "we need you to come with us." "This is my house," I said. My voice sounded strange, thin. "Elara, don't make this difficult," Liam said from behind me. He was already back at the monitor. Serena, still wrapped in my silk robe, was watching me, her expression one of mild curiosity, as if I were a household problem, like a leak or a broken appliance. That was finally being handled. The men didn't touch me. They simply flanked me. One of them gestured to the hallway. I was being escorted. I walked past the photos of our life, past the art I had chosen, past the front door I had walked through that afternoon. I had my phone in my hand and my wallet in my purse. That was all. "You can't do this," I said, but the words had no force. "Sir's orders, ma'am," the guard said. They walked me to the front gate, which slid open. I stepped out onto the public road. The gate slid shut behind me with a heavy, final click. I stood on the curb in the hills above Austin, my life on the other side of a wall of steel and glass. I got a rideshare to a hotel downtown. I was in a state of shock, functioning on autopilot. The next morning, I woke up to a new reality. The purge had begun. The first was an email at 8:03 a.m. It was from Stratus Creative Solutions, from Human Resources. The subject line was Termination of Employment. I opened it, my hands shaking. It was brief, corporate. This email serves as official notice of your immediate termination, due to a severe breach of confidentiality and a fundamental conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, I scrolled down. The email was countersigned by my boss, Mark, who I'd had brunch with just last month. Mark, who I had helped land his biggest clients. And then I remembered. Mark was one of the first enthusiastic investors in Apex. He sat on Liam's advisory board. My stomach heaved. I had been fired from a job I was good at by a man who was in on the lie. I tried to call my mother. The call went to voicemail. I tried my aunt, Serena's mother's sister. She picked up on the fourth ring. Ilara, oh, honey. Her voice was strange, distant, full of a pity that felt sharp and wrong. Aunt June, thank God, Liam, Serena, they... Ilara, stop. She cut me off. Serena called last night. She was hysterical. We know what's happening. What? What do you know? We know you've been under a lot of stress, that you're not well. Serena told us how she and Liam found each other. And when they tried to tell you, you became violent, that you had a complete mental breakdown. Honey, that you've been having paranoid delusions. I couldn't breathe. Serena, the master of her own narrative, had preemptively poisoned every well, using her practiced vulnerability as a weapon. I was no longer a victim. I was a crazy, violent woman. That's a lie, I whispered. She's lying. He's lying. The best thing you can do right now is get help, my aunt said, her voice hardening. We're praying for you. She hung up. The financial lines were cut next. I went to check out of the hotel to find a cheaper one. The front desk clerk swiped my credit card. I'm sorry, Ms. Mason, this card has been declined. That's impossible. Try this one. I gave him my debit card. He tried it. Declined. I gave him my last card, the one linked to our primary joint account. Declined. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. I opened my banking app. Account frozen. Account frozen. Account suspended. Every dollar, even my own paycheck from Stratos, had been deposited into accounts that were part of the complex trust structure Liam had me sign off on. I had nothing. As I was standing at the counter, a man in a cheap suit approached me. Ilara Mason. Yes, you've been served. He handed me a thick envelope and walked away. I tore it open. Legal documents. Mason v. Mason. A petition for divorce. I read the allegations, my vision blurring. He was filing for a restraining order. He was claiming acute mental instability and erratic and dangerous behavior. He was citing my violent outburst at the house. He was building a case that I was insane, a threat to him and to Serena. I left the hotel. I had to find a lawyer. But I had no money. The big-name firms that had once vied for our business wouldn't even take my call. I was toxic. I ended up in the sterile, fluorescent-lit office of a court-appointed attorney who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He glanced at the trust documents I'd managed to find in my email. He didn't look up when he spoke. You have nothing, Ms. Mason. It's all in the Apex Irrevocable Trust. You signed the financial proxies. You signed the power of attorney. You gave him everything. You don't even have standing to sue. It had been 72 hours. 3 days. I had gone from a glass house in the hills to being penniless and legally radioactive. I walked out of his office into the harsh sunlight. I had one thing of value left, my mother's vintage gold watch. I took it to a pawn shop and argued with the man behind the counter until he gave me $400. I used that cash to pay the security deposit on a single, squalid studio apartment on the other side of the highway. The paint was peeling, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. As I turned the key in the lock, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home felt like the last nail in my coffin. The collapse was total. The weeks that followed were a blur of beige, the color of the peeling paint in my studio apartment, the color of the smog outside the one window. I was invisible. My phone, once a symphony of alerts and messages, was silent. I had been excised from my own life with surgical precision. I spent my days in the sterile quiet of the public library, using their computers to apply for remote freelance work. I was a ghost, trying to earn enough for the next week's rent. I quickly learned that my name, Alara Mason, was poison. The story of Liam's unstable wife had spread through our circles like a virus. I was a liability. The few callbacks I got for small, $80 branding gigs evaporated as soon as they ran a background check. I was completely, profoundly alone. I had been buried, and the soil was being packed down tight. One afternoon, I returned to the apartment, and among the pizza flyers and payday loan ads stuffed into the communal mailbox, there was one piece of mail that felt different. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was a law firm, Hollis & Grant, PLLC, a name I did not recognize. I tore it open. It was a formal, one-page letter requesting my presence at my earliest convenience to discuss the estate of Mr. Arthur Mason, my uncle. I hadn't thought about him in weeks. I'd assumed he died as he had lived for the last decade broke and disgraced. What a state. The office was in an old, quiet building that smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was the opposite of Liam's world. Mr. Hollis was an older gentleman whose suit was clean but worn. He looked at me with kind, tired eyes, and not a flicker of the judgment I had grown used to. "Ms. Mason, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a worn leather chair. "I was your uncle's attorney for the last few years of his life. He spoke of you often. My condolences." I heard he had an accident," I said, repeating the vague story my mother had told me. Mr. Hollis shook his head slowly. "No, Ms. Mason, that was the story the family preferred. I believe it was liver disease. He knew he was on a timetable for the last 6 months. He spent that time putting his affairs in order. This information stopped me. Arthur hadn't just died. He had prepared. He was a very meticulous man, despite his reputation. Mr. Hollis continued. He didn't have much. His name was ruined, as you know. But he had an old life insurance policy he'd kept active, and a small portfolio he'd managed to hide from his creditors. He set up a trust, with you as the sole beneficiary, to be dispersed only upon his death. He slid a cashier's check across the wide mahogany desk. It's not a fortune, I'm afraid, but he was very clear that it was to be yours and yours alone. I picked it up. My heart wasn't beating. It was hammering, a single, painful pulse in my chest. The amount was $95,000. It wasn't a random number. It was the exact figure Liam's lawyers had listed as a nuisance value buyout for the Virginia land in the divorce papers. He knew. Liam knew about this inheritance. He had priced my destruction to the penny. "There is one other item," Mr. Hollis said, retrieving a thick 9x12 manila envelope from his desk. It was sealed. Your uncle was very specific. I was to give this to you directly, and only you, when you came to collect. I took the envelope. It felt heavy. I left the office, walked to a small park, and sat on a bench, the check burning a hole in my purse. My hands were trembling as I broke the seal. Inside, there was no money. There was a single, old-fashioned metal key for a safety deposit box, and a letter, folded 3 times, written on cheap legal paper in Arthur's familiar, spidery handwriting. "Alara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you've lost everything. It means I'm dead, and it means Liam finally showed his true colors. I tried to warn you. You were too in love, and he was too good at the game. But I know you. You're a fighter. You just let him convince you that you weren't. I had to stop and breathe, a raw sob catching in my throat. This money, the letter continued, the 95,000, it is not for you to run. It is not to find a new apartment. It is to buy bullets. Liam isn't a fund, he's a Ponzi. The entire thing. Apex Sustainability is the most brilliant and diabolical house of cards I have ever seen. He uses green energy as a holy cloak to hook rich, naive, and powerful investors who want to feel good about themselves while he robs them blind. He's a vampire, a Lara, feeding on their virtue. But he's in trouble. Ponzi's always bleed cash. They have to. He's paying off his original investors with money from new investors, and the well is running dry. He needs to liquidate every clean, hard asset he can get his hands on to make the interest payments and keep the music from stopping. He needs that worthless piece of land in Virginia, the one from your mother. He needs it more than anything. I couldn't find out why before the end, but the key is there. He thinks it's a loose end. He's wrong. It's the linchpin. The key was for a box at a small credit union across town, a place I had never even heard of. The vault was old, the air stale. I signed the ledger. A clerk led me into a small, private viewing room and brought me the long, steel box. I lifted the lid, my heart pounding. It wasn't cash. It wasn't gold. It was a war chest. On top, there was a bulky, slightly dated satellite phone. Beside it, an old, heavy external hard drive, and underneath, rolled up and bound with a rubber band, were detailed topographical maps and architectural blueprints of the Virginia property. They were covered in Arthur's angry, meticulous annotations, with circles, arrows, and technical notes that I didn't understand. I sat in that cold, quiet room. The despair that had been my only companion for weeks was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, clarifying, and righteous rage. My uncle hadn't been a bitter, failed man. He had been a lookout, and he had just given me the keys to the entire operation. The first move wasn't mine. It was his. The email arrived not from my court-appointed lawyer, but directly from Liam's high-priced legal team. It was a final notice of public auction. The notice was cold, brutal, and precise. The Virginia property, my mother's land, was being seized to satisfy outstanding marital debts, debts he had entirely fabricated and assigned to me. The auction was public, scheduled to take place in less than 48 hours. I scrolled to the bottom of the document, and the air left my lungs. The starting bid, $95,000. It was an exact match. He knew. He had known about Arthur's trust, about the exact amount. This entire performance of a public auction was a trap, designed for an audience of one. It was his final act of humiliation. He wasn't just trying to get the land, he was trying to strip me of my uncle's last gift. I saw the chessboard. He expected me to be desperate, sentimental, and stupid. He wanted me to show up, holding Arthur's check, and bid on my mother's land. The moment I entered that $95,000 into the system, his lawyers would pounce. They would file injunctions, claim the money was a disputed marital asset, and tie me up in a legal battle I couldn't afford to fight for 5 minutes. He would get the land, and he would get the money. He would leave me with absolutely nothing. I sat on the lumpy mattress of my studio apartment, the satellite phone feeling heavy and foreign in my hand. I plugged in the external hard drive. It was password protected, of course, but Arthur had been thorough. The password was written on the inside of the battery cover of the phone, too green, too bad. The drive contained a meticulous, terrifying archive, partial spreadsheets, encrypted audio files, copies of wire transfers. It was Arthur's entire investigation, and in a text file named Contacts, there was one entry. Not a name, just a string of numbers labeled Fixer, use only if buried. I was buried. I took the satellite phone outside, standing in the crumbling alleyway behind my building to get a signal. I dialed the number. A voice answered on the first ring. It was gravelly, genderless, and utterly calm. "You're late?" "I'm Arthur Mason's niece," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I know who you are. Ms. Mason. I've been monitoring this phone's activity since he missed his last check-in. I assume you're calling about the package?" "Yes, I have the drive, and I have $95,000. My husband he's auctioning a piece of land in 48 hours. He's trying to take the money." "Yes," the voice said. "The Virginia plot. We know." Arthur was very interested in that land. He was also very clear in his instructions. "Are you prepared to follow them exactly?" "I am," I said, a new, cold resolve settling over me. "Good. Because your uncle's plan has nothing to do with that auction. You will not fight Liam Mason in court. You will not try to outbid him. You will let him think he's won. He's an arrogant man. We will use that." For the next 6 hours, I was a conduit for a plan set in motion months ago. I did not move from the alley, following the fixer's precise, step-by-step instructions. I used the library's public Wi-Fi, routed through 3 different virtual private networks, to access a state portal. I created a new anonymous LLC in Delaware. The name was simple, meaningless, and a private tribute. A.M. Holdings. Arthur Mason. Next, I went to a national bank, not the small credit union, and opened a corporate account for A.M. Holdings. I deposited the entire $95,000 check. The money was now clean, corporate, and untraceable to me personally. It was no longer an inheritance. It was a business asset. I spent the next 24 hours in my room, the satellite phone on the table, waiting. I watched the clock on the auction website count down. I did nothing. The fixer called me an hour before the auction was set to begin. "It's time. Liam is moving. He's using a shell company, Kestro Solutions, to make the purchase. The representative is already at the county courthouse." "What do I do?" I asked. "Nothing. You are going to stay on this line. My team is moving now." I heard a faint click on the line, then the sound of typing. "Arthur's data on that drive was incomplete," the fixer said, "but it was enough to identify the architecture of Liam's money laundering operation. Kestro Solutions is his primary vehicle for moving dirty cash into clean assets. He's arrogant enough to use it for this, for a personal vendetta. And we just sent an anonymous, highly detailed whistleblower complaint to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the IRS. We provided 3 specific account numbers and transaction IDs, courtesy of your uncle's hard drive, proving that Kestro Solutions is a front for money laundering, specifically to defraud Apex investors. The complaint was filed now." I looked at the auction clock. 10 minutes remaining. "But will they even see it in time?" I whispered. "They will when it's flagged as urgent active billion-dollar Ponzi scheme." The fixer replied, "The automated compliance triggers are already firing. They don't need to investigate the whole case. They just need to act on the specific verifiable complaint." I held my breath. The phone was silent except for the fixer's calm breathing. 5 minutes, I said. "He'll be getting the alert," the fixer said. I imagined Liam in his glass office, supremely confident, waiting for the call that the land was his. 1 minute. "Wait for it," the fixer said. The auction clock on my laptop hit 0 and the status changed to live. "It's starting," I said. And, "There it is," the fixer said, a note of grim satisfaction in their voice. "A federal letter of inquiry has just been faxed to the Kestro's registered agent. Simultaneously, an immediate administrative freeze has been placed on all accounts associated with their tax identification number, pending investigation into suspicious financial activities." The complaint was just too specific for them to ignore. On my screen, the auction status changed again. Postponed. Bitter ineligibility. Liam's representative, standing in that courthouse, had just tried to log into the auction, only to find that the entity he represented, Kestros Solutions, had its assets frozen solid. He couldn't bid. He couldn't access a single dollar. Liam hadn't just lost the auction. His favorite tool, his primary shell company, was now compromised and under a federal microscope, all because he couldn't resist trying to steal $95,000 from me. "He's trapped," I said, the realization dawning. "He can't get the land." "He's not just trapped, Ms. Mason," the fixer said. "He's spooked. He's a cornered animal. Now, he'll have to go for it himself. And he'll have to go now. Get packed. You're going to Virginia." The line was quiet for exactly 30 seconds. I could hear the faint digital hiss of the satellite connection. Then, the fixer spoke, their voice sharp, pulling me from the cold victory of the auction. "He knows. The blowback on Kestro's was immediate. He's lost his legal instrument, and he just found out the SEC is sniffing his primary shell company. He's panicking. He's not going to wait for a subpoena. He's going to the asset. He's going to destroy the servers." "Servers?" I asked. I was standing in the alley, the brick cool against my back. "What servers?" "Your uncle's final note," the fixer said. "The blueprints. You've been looking at the property. Ms. Mason, you should have been looking at the maps. It's not the land. It's what's under it. That derelict pump station. It's a facade. It's the entrance to an old, shielded Cold War communications bunker." My blood ran cold. Uncle Arthur's frantic annotations on the blueprints suddenly made sense. They weren't just land surveys. They were technical schematics. "It's where he keeps the real books," the fixer continued, their pace quickening. "The brain. The cold storage server. It's air-gapped, disconnected from the network. It holds the raw data of the Ponzi, the original investor lists, the unedited transaction logs. Everything. The drive Arthur gave you. That's just the table of contents. The bunker has the entire library. He has to wipe it before the SEC pivots from Kestro's to Apex itself. He's on the move." "He'll send his security," I said. The old fear, the feeling of being small, returning. "No," the fixer said flatly. "He can't trust them. Not with this. This is the truth. The one thing he can't spin, or buy, or intimidate, he'll go himself, and he'll bring thermite, or worse. He's driving to Virginia right now, thinking he's in a race against the government. He's wrong. He's in a race against you. How do I beat him there? He's in Austin. I'm in Austin. You don't. You're already there. The $95,000 from A.M. Holdings," the fixer said. "It wasn't just for the Delaware setup. 80,000 of it was wired 36 hours ago to a private security consultant in Virginia. You didn't buy a legal defense. Ms. Mason, you bought an offense. My team. They're ex-military, and they've been on site for the last 12 hours. I closed my eyes, understanding the depth of Arthur's and the fixer's plan. "I'm on a flight I don't know I paid for," I said, repeating the instructions the fixer had given me the day before. I was already packed. "I'll be landing in Virginia in 3 hours. "We'll meet you at the rendezvous," the fixer said. "He's driving, frantic, probably breaking every speed limit. He's got a 12-hour drive. Minimum. You'll be there with hours to spare. He's blinded by rage. You're moving with a plan. He thinks he's the predator. We're going to let him hunt." The line went dead. The team was exactly what the fixer had promised. Not mercenaries, but specialists. 4 men and 1 woman, led by a man with cold blue eyes who introduced himself only as Rhodes. They were quiet, professional, and moved with an economy of motion that was terrifyingly efficient. They didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me like a client, the principal in an operation. We didn't take the main road to the property. We used a series of old logging trails marked on Arthur's map, arriving at the coordinates in complete darkness. The pump station was a concrete scar under the moonlight, covered in graffiti and kudzu. Rhodes consulted the blueprints. He didn't look at the rusted, padlocked front door. He pointed to a large metal ventilation grate 20 yards away, almost completely swallowed by the undergrowth. That's the emergency egress. It's faster and quieter. Two of his team members moved in. They didn't use bolt cutters. They used a silent hydraulic spreader that tore the rusted bolts from the concrete like they were wet paper. The heavy grate was pulled aside, revealing a dark, square tunnel that smelled of rust, damp earth, and ozone. "We're going in," I whispered, my heart hammering. Rhodes shook his head, his eyes scanning the tree line. "No, ma'am, we don't go into the trap. We set it. We secure the perimeter. He doesn't know we're here. We let him walk right in. He's coming to destroy evidence. Our job is to let him in, and keep him in." We set up a command post in the trees, 100 yards back, shielded by a rise in the terrain. While the team set up silent motion sensors and perimeter cameras, I unpacked my laptop and Arthur's heavy hard drive. I needed to see what I had. It was exactly as the fixer said. Damning, but incomplete. Fragments of ledgers from 5 years ago, encrypted audio files with no keys, transaction logs that showed money moving from Apex to Kestro's, but not the full, devastating picture of the 1,000 other threads connecting them. It was enough to get the SEC to freeze a single shell company. It was not enough to convict. It was not enough to bring down a billion-dollar empire. Liam could sacrifice Kestro's. He could blame it on Serena or a rogue employee. I needed the main server. I needed the brain. We waited. The hours dragged. The Virginia woods grew dark. The only sound the insects and the quiet breathing of the professionals around me. At 3:17 in the morning, Rhodes held up a single gloved hand. I heard it too. A car, driving much too fast on the gravel access road, a dark SUV, its headlights off, skidded to a stop near the main pump station. The engine cut, and the silence was absolute. The driver's door opened. Liam. He was not the polished genius from the magazine covers. He was a man undone. His jacket was gone. His white shirt was rumpled and stained with sweat. His sleeves were rolled up. He was running on pure, uncut rage. He hauled a heavy black duffel bag from the passenger seat. The thermite, just as the fixer predicted. He stormed toward the main door of the pump station, pulling a keyring from his pocket. He was desperate, exhausted, and completely exposed. Then he stopped. He froze. He had seen it. My team hadn't touched the main door, but they had opened the ventilation shaft, and they hadn't closed it. Rhodes had instructed them to leave the heavy steel grate ajar, open just 6 inches. It was a clear, unmissable sign that someone had already been there. Liam dropped his bag. His head snapped left, then right, his eyes frantically scanning the dark, silent tree line. He thought the SEC had beaten him here. He thought he was walking into a federal raid. He drew a small, black handgun from the small of his back. "He knows," I whispered to Rhodes. "Good," Rhodes whispered back. "Let him hunt." Liam didn't run. He was trapped. He couldn't leave the servers. He couldn't risk the authorities finding them intact. He had to go in. He snatched up his bag, kicked the ventilation grate wide open with a metallic bang, and plunged into the darkness of the bunker. The bunker swallowed him. I watched him disappear into the black square of the ventilation shaft, and for a moment, the only sound was the frantic chirping of insects. Rhodes, beside me in the darkness of our command post, tapped the laptop screen. "We have eyes," he whispered. The screen flickered, then resolved into a grainy green and black infrared image. "Uncle Arthur, you magnificent, paranoid bastard!" He had installed a pinhole camera, high in the corner of the bunker's main chamber, wired to an independent, long-life battery. I was watching Liam from beyond the grave. The chamber was a perfect concrete box, sweating with damp. I saw Liam land heavily on the floor, his gun raised, his body coiled. He swept the room, left, then right. He was breathing heavily, the sound a ragged rasp over the audio feed, and in the center of the room, exactly as the blueprints had shown, was the server, a single, 7-foot-tall, black data rack. It was humming faintly, a small green light glowing on its power supply. It was running on a backup battery. He knew it was a trap. His movements were jerky, feral. He saw the server, intact, and that seemed to unnerve him completely. He edged forward, gun still up, checking the dark corners. He was alone. He finally reached the server, dropping his duffel bag. He pulled out a block of thermite and a small, complex ignition device. He was going to melt it, but first, he slammed his open palm against the rack's interface, trying to wake it up, perhaps to initiate a data wipe. Nothing. The screen remained dark. He hit it again, a frustrated guttural sound rising in his throat. Rhodes, next to me, allowed himself the smallest, coldest smile. Main power was cut 2 hours ago. That backup battery only runs the ventilation and the cabinet's internal cooling. He can't interface with it. He can't wipe it. He can only physically destroy it. Liam seemed to realize this. He snarled and began attaching the thermite charge to the main processing unit. It was time. Next to my laptop was a small, military-style radio handset. Rhodes's team had found the junction box and patched it directly into the bunker's ancient intercom system. Arthur had highlighted the wiring schematics in red ink. My hand was perfectly steady as I picked it up. I depressed the talk button. "Hello, Liam." My voice, amplified 100 times, metallic and disembodied, blasted into the concrete chamber. On the screen, he screamed. It was a raw, animal sound. He spun, firing 2 shots wildly into the darkness, the muzzle flash momentarily whiting out the infrared camera. The bullets ricocheted with a high-pitched, metallic whine. "Are you looking for this?" I continued, my voice perfectly calm, almost conversational. "Ilara." He was shouting at the ceiling, his gun moving from shadow to shadow. "Where are you? Show yourself, you bitch." "I'm right where you left me, Liam, in the ruins," I said. You should have known Arthur was smarter than you. He knew. He knew it was a Ponzi scheme. He knew green energy was just a cloak to hook investors. He knew you were bleeding cash. "You're insane, you're crazy," he yelled, but his voice was cracking. He was terrified. He turned back to the server, his hands fumbling with the thermite. "You needed this land," I said, my voice hardening, cutting through his panic. "You needed to destroy the proof, the real ledgers, the unedited transaction logs, the names of every investor you robbed blind, the ones you were paying off with money from new victims." "Shut up." He was trying to arm the device. "Shut up, shut up." "And Serena," I said, the name hanging in the damp air. "You turned my family against me. You built a story that I was unstable. You had me purged from my own life in 72 hours, all to protect this box of secrets." "It was her idea," he roared, spinning away from the server to scream at the speaker again, his face a mask of desperation. "She ran the books. She planned it all. She fed me the lines. She's the one you want." And as if summoned by his final betrayal, a second figure detached itself from the same black shadows of the entrance tunnel he had just passed. I saw her on the camera feed before he did. It was Serena. She was wearing dark pants and a dark jacket, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she was holding a handgun, gripped in both hands, pointed directly at Liam's back. She must have had a tracker on his car. She must have followed him, every bit as desperate, every bit as cornered. "He's lying." "Ilara." Serena's voice was shrill, hysterical, echoing alongside mine. Liam spun around, his gun came up, his face, in that moment, was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He had been so focused on me, the ghost in the machine, that he hadn't seen the Viper right behind him. "You told me the Cayman Islands," Serena shrieked, taking a step into the low light. Her hands were shaking, but her aim was steady. "You said we would be safe. You said we were partners. You weren't supposed to destroy it, you idiot. You were supposed to bring it, I understood in an instant. She wasn't here to destroy the server. She was here to steal it. This was her leverage. This was her plan to blackmail Liam, his investors, everyone. "Give me the drive, Serena," Liam said, his voice dropping, trying to regain the calm, authoritative tone he always used. "I have my own copy," she spat. "But this is the original. This is the one that gets us $100 million. Now, back away from it." "We destroy it. We walk away free," he said, taking a calculated step toward her. "You walk away free, I take the fall," she screamed. "I am not going to this pit with you." He lunged. It was not a graceful cinematic fight. It was a pathetic, ugly scramble. Liam, taller and stronger, grabbed for her gun. Serena, fueled by pure feral panic, fought back, kicking and twisting. They slammed hard against the server rack. A gun went off. The sound was deafening, even over the audio feed. A bright orange spark flared on the side of the server rack, a puff of black smoke. The small green backup battery light on the rack flickered once, twice, and died, plunging the bunker into absolute infrared darkness. "Now," Rhodes said calmly into his comms. I watched on the screen. The bunker's main door, the heavy steel one Liam had ignored, burst open. My team, which had silently entered and stacked up in the tunnel while the confrontation unfolded, flooded the room. "Flashbang!" one of them yelled. The camera feed went pure, blinding white. The audio overloaded with a deafening crack. I heard screams, both Liam's and Serena's, high-pitched and terrified, cut brutally short. I heard the sound of a scuffle, bodies hitting the concrete, and the sharp, plastic zit of zip ties being pulled tight. After 10 seconds of chaos, the feed stabilized. The smoke from the flashbang was clearing. Liam and Serena were face down on the concrete floor, 5 feet apart, their hands bound behind their backs. Rhodes's voice came over my earpiece, calm and clear as a bell. "Ma'am, the assets are secure. Both targets are restrained." I stood up from the command post, my legs steady beneath me. The smell of sulfur and ozone from the flashbang was just beginning to drift out of the tunnel, a bitter incense. Rhodes had already dispatched 2 of his team members, one a technical specialist, back into the bunker. I picked up the satellite phone and Arthur's hard drive, and I began to walk. The woods were silent again. My footsteps were quiet on the pine needles as I crossed the 100 yards to the ventilation shaft. I climbed down the iron ladder, my hands sure on the rungs. The air in the bunker was thick and acrid. The emergency lights, triggered by the explosion, had flickered on, casting a weak, buzzing, yellow glow over the scene. Liam and Serena were exactly as I had seen them on the camera, face down, bound, and neutralized. They were no longer the titans of my old life. They were just 2 people, breathing heavily, their expensive clothes smeared with concrete dust and fear. Rhodes's tech specialist was already at the server rack. He had a powerful flashlight, and I watched him examine the damage. The shot Serena had fired had torn a hole in the external power supply unit. I touched the earpiece that connected me to the fixer, who was monitoring from the command post. "What's the status?" I asked, my voice flat in the small, damp space. "The shot was sloppy," the fixer's voice came back, crisp and clear. "She hit the power conditioner. It's fried. But the drive array itself is shielded. It's a military spec unit. The data is intact. 100%. The specialist looked back at me and nodded once, confirming. He unzipped his own bag and pulled out a portable, high-voltage battery pack and a series of data cables. A choked sound came from the floor. Liam was twisting his head, his cheek pressed against the dirty concrete, trying to look at me. His eyes were wide with a new kind of terror. The data existed. "Ilara," he gasped, the confident charm replaced by a raw, pleading rasp. "Ilara, think about this. Don't be stupid. This is everything. We can share it. You and me. Not her." He spat, gesturing with his head toward Serena. Just us. There are hundreds of millions in accounts they can't find. You can have it all. You can have whatever you want. Just let me go. Just destroy that drive. His words fell into the silence, and I just looked at him. I looked at the man who had ordered me out of my own home, who had labeled me as insane, who had methodically torn my life apart. Then, the other sound, sobbing. Serena was trying to push herself up, her face a grotesque mask of tears and dirt. "Alara, sister, please," she wept, the old familiar sound of her practiced vulnerability. "Alara, please listen. He made me. He forced me. I was so scared. You know him. He's a monster. You were always so good to me. Alara, you always protected me. Please, don't let them take me. Save me. I'll tell you everything. I'll help you." I watched them both, the salesman and the victim, playing their final desperate hands. I said nothing. I turned to the tech specialist, who had successfully powered on the server's drive array. He held out a heavy-duty portable drive, identical to the one in my hand. I handed him mine. He slotted it into the port and began the copy. A small blue light began to blink, the only clean color in the room. The sound of the data transferring was a quiet, steady whir. Only then did I speak. I looked down at Liam. "You valued me at $95,000, I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the bunker. That was my price, the cost of my compliance, my silence, my entire life. You were wrong. It was the price of this. I gestured to the commandos, the equipment. It was just enough to hire this team for 72 hours. So thank you, Liam. Your valuation was my budget." His face went slack. I turned my gaze to Serena. She was staring at me, her sobs frozen. "My love was not a weakness for you to exploit. Serena," I said, "and it is not a currency you can bargain with. Not anymore." I turned my back on them both. The blue light on the drive stopped blinking. The copy was complete. The specialist ejected the drive and handed it to me. It felt warm. I walked out of the bunker, up the ladder, and into the clean, cold Virginia night air. I did not look back. Rhodes was waiting for me. "The targets are secured. What are your orders?" "Ma'am, your team will wipe their prints, remove all your gear, and be gone in 10 minutes. I said. "Then you will call the local sheriff's department, report an anonymous tip about a breaking and entering in progress, with shots fired at these coordinates. Let the local police, Liam's police, be the ones to find them. Let them try to explain what they were doing in a Cold War bunker with 2 guns and a server rack." Rhodes nodded. "And you?" "I'm leaving." I gripped the satellite phone. I walked away from the command post, toward the path where my rented car was hidden. I had 2 calls to make. First, I dialed the number for the SEC whistleblower office in Washington, D.C. A sleepy-sounding duty officer answered. "My name is A.M. Holdings," I said, my voice cold and precise. "I am the registered agent for a Delaware LLC. I am in possession of the complete, unedited server data for the Apex Sustainability Ventures Ponzi scheme. I am prepared to deliver this evidence in exchange for full statutory protection and the maximum financial reward as provided by law." There was a stunned silence, then a frantic clicking of keys on the other end. "Ma'am, can you please hold?" I hung up. They had my satellite number. They would find me. Second, I scrolled through the sparse contacts on Arthur's phone. I found the one he had labeled David Whitehall, London, honest bastard. I dialed the international number. It was the middle of the night in England. It rang 5 times, and a man answered, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. "Whitehall, Mr. Whitehall," I said. "My name is Alara Mason. My uncle was Arthur Mason." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Arthur. Christ, I haven't heard that name in years. He was a good man. What is this? He called you an honest bastard. He said you were the only one he'd trust to print the truth. I have the story he died trying to get. It's about Liam Mason and Apex Sustainability." "Apex," he scoffed. "That's a clean fund. It's the greenest—" "It's a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme." I cut him off. "And I have the server. The entire server. The original books. The investor lists. Everything." "How fast can you get your best reporter to Austin?" "Texas." I drove away from the access road as the first hint of gray light touched the Virginia sky. The server copy was heavy in my bag. Behind me, Rhodes's team was already gone, melting back into the world they operated from, leaving no trace except for a single, untraceable anonymous call to the local county sheriff's dispatcher. I was on a plane back to Austin before the sun was fully up. The next morning, the world broke. David Whitehall moved faster than I could have imagined. The London paper he worked for didn't just publish a story, it dropped a bomb. The headline, in a massive, aggressive font, was everywhere online within minutes. "Apex Empire Collapses Decade's Largest Green Energy Ponzi Scheme." It was not an accusation, it was a forensic takedown. The article, based on the complete server data I had provided to Whitehall's frantic reporter in an Austin hotel lobby, was brutal in its objective detail. It laid out the entire sickening architecture of the lie. It named the first investors from 10 years ago who were still being paid massive returns with money from new clients. It detailed the green projects that were nothing but ghost developments on worthless land. It traced the intricate web of offshore accounts, starting with Kestro Solutions and spreading like a cancer. And it detailed Serena's role. It showed her digital signature on every key transfer. It highlighted the parallel accounting system she had built, a work of dark genius. She was not a subordinate, she was the architect. The fallout was instantaneous. The Securities and Exchange Commission, humiliated by a foreign newspaper publishing a complete investigation into a fraud happening under their noses, moved with a speed born of pure panic. It was no longer a quiet inquiry into a single shell company. Within 3 hours, a federal judge had signed a blanket order. All assets, global and domestic, tied to Apex Sustainability Ventures, Liam Mason, Serena, and over 50 related shell companies, were frozen. The music had stopped. Mid-beat. In Virginia, 2 confused sheriff's deputies had finally responded to the breaking and entering call at the old pump station. They found Liam and Serena, still bound, shivering, and trying to spin a frantic, incoherent story of being kidnapped, of being victims. It was a story that might have worked at 4 in the morning, but by 9:30 a.m., the deputies' phones were glowing with the breaking news from London. They looked at the headline, then at the genius and his assistant sitting in the dirt. Liam and Serena were arrested on the spot. The charges were immediate conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and, thanks to their pathetic struggle in the bunker, felony assault with a deadly weapon. The shockwaves hit Austin. At 10 a.m., I watched from the window of a new, anonymous apartment as 2 dark sedans pulled up outside the gleaming offices of Stratus Creative Solutions. Federal agents walked calmly inside. 10 minutes later, they walked out with Mark, my old boss, his hands cuffed behind his back. His conflict of interest had just been upgraded to co-conspirator. Then came the calls. My family. The ones who had listened to Serena's tears and believed I was insane. My mother's name appeared on my burner phone's screen. I watched it buzz. Then my aunt. Then my mother again. The calls becoming more frequent, more desperate, as the truth of what they had done, who they had believed, settled on them like ash. I let the phone vibrate, the buzzing sound a quiet, final judgment. I did not answer. Now came the final move. The federal agencies were in chaos. The press had the full, damning server copy. The SEC and FBI, by contrast, had nothing but a newspaper article and 2 incoherent, lying suspects in a Virginia jail. They had no official evidence. Through the satellite phone, my fixer made contact one last time, on behalf of A.M. Holdings. A meeting was arranged, not in an office, but on a quiet public park bench. Two agents, a man and a woman, both looking exhausted and furious. "You're A.M. Holdings," the woman said. It was not a question. "We know you called the SEC. We know you called Whitehall. We need the server, the full copy." "I don't have a server copy," I said calmly. "Don't play games," the man snapped. "That London article is a data dump. They got it from you." "I gave them a story," I said. "What I have for you is different. What I have is evidence." I placed Arthur's old, heavy external hard drive on the bench between us. "What is this?" the woman asked. "That is my uncle's investigation. It contains partial ledgers, transaction logs, and audio files he gathered before his death. It's the table of contents, if you will. It's the key that led me to the bunker. It's enough to get you search warrants for every bank Liam ever used. It's enough to build an ironclad case." They stared at the drive. They knew it was partial, but they also knew it was clean. It wasn't a copy given to a journalist. It was the original work product of a whistleblower. It was admissible. It was a foundation. "We want it all," the man insisted. "This is what I have," I said, "and I am prepared to give it to you, along with my full testimony, in exchange for two things. First, a signed letter of full, blanket immunity for Ilara Mason for any and all documents she may have signed under duress. Second, the maximum statutory whistleblower reward, paid to A.M. Holdings, as provided by law for the recovery of assets." They looked at each other. They were being outplayed, but they had no choice. The press was running wild. They needed a win. "You'll get your immunity," the woman said, "and the reward, pending asset recovery." I picked up Arthur's drive and handed it to her. I had kept my promise. I had used his bullets. I walked away from the park, leaving them with the key. I still had the library. The complete server copy was safe, my insurance. I had given the press the truth, and I had given the government a weapon. It was more than enough. The courtroom was suffocating, packed with journalists and the ghosts of investors. It had taken 18 months to get here, 18 months of legal maneuvering and agonizing depositions. I had spent that time in quiet anonymity, rebuilding. Liam sat at the defense table. He was not the man I had known. The trial had hollowed him out. His expensive suit hung on a frame that had lost its arrogance. He looked old, his skin gray, his eyes perpetually scanning the room for an exit, a deal, an angle. He was a cornered animal, and he looked it. Serena was not there. She had taken a plea deal months ago, trading her testimony for a reduced sentence. She had wept on the stand, painting herself as Liam's victim, a story she had perfected over a lifetime. It didn't matter. The data I had provided was irrefutable. Liam was alone. His defense attorney, a shark from a downtown firm, was giving his closing argument. He had only one play. "This entire case," he boomed, gesturing to the prosecution, "is built on two tainted sources, a convicted co-conspirator, Serena, who lied to save herself, and the testimony of a vindictive, unstable, and disgruntled wife." He pointed at me, where I sat in the front row. A woman who, by her own admission, was suffering from paranoia. A woman who, in a jealous rage, orchestrated this entire theatrical takedown. The prosecutor, a sharp, composed woman in her 40s, let the accusation hang in the air for a moment before she stood. "The people call our final rebuttal witness, Ilara Mason." A hush fell. I stood, my footsteps silent on the floor as I walked to the witness box. I could feel Liam's eyes on me, but I did not look at him. I took the oath, my voice clear and steady. I was not the woman they expected. The shadow that had lived in the glass house was gone. I wore a simple, perfectly tailored black suit. My hair was cut short, a practical style that framed a face that was no longer soft. My gaze was cold, direct, and utterly devoid of fear. For 2 hours, the prosecutor walked me back through the evidence. I did not speak of my feelings. I did not speak of betrayal or infidelity. Or a ruined anniversary? I spoke of facts. I pulled up the Kestro Solutions balance sheets on the courtroom monitor. I explained, in the calm, clear language of a brand strategist, how the money was routed. I showed the jury the exact dates of the restructuring documents I had been forced to sign and how they corresponded, to the day, with massive hidden payouts to the earliest investors. I dissected Liam's empire with the cold precision of a surgeon. I was not a woman scorned. I was an expert. When it was the defense attorney's turn, he approached me, his face slick with sweat. He was ruined, and he knew it. He had to try a knockout punch. "Ms. Mason," he sneered, "you've done your homework. It's quite the performance. But let's be honest about why you're here. You're the primary applicant for the federal whistleblower reward, are you not? A.M. Holdings, the entity I control, is the applicant." "Yes," I replied. "So you did all of this for the money," he shouted, turning to the jury. "Your husband, a visionary, built an empire, and you decided you wanted a bigger piece. This was never about justice. It was about greed." I let his voice echo in the silent room. I turned my head, slowly, away from him. I looked at the 12 faces of the jury, and then I turned and looked, for the first time, directly at Liam. He visibly recoiled. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "I did it for $95,000. The lawyer was thrown. "What? What did you say? $95,000? I repeated. "That is the price my husband, Mr. Mason, put on my head. It was the amount of a small inheritance from my uncle. He knew I had it, and he engineered a fraudulent auction to steal it from me, to take the last penny I had on earth. He believed that was my total value, my price. He was wrong." I turned back to the jury, my voice strong and clear, filling the room. He built a billion-dollar empire on a mountain of lies, funded by good people who believed in a better world. But that empire was not brought down by the SEC or the FBI or a jealous wife. It was brought down by a $95,000 inheritance, and by the truth, painstakingly gathered by a disgraced reporter my husband dismissed as a paranoid old man. I leaned forward, my gaze locking on the lawyer. "Mr. Mason's empire was not destroyed by me. It was simply exposed. I did not bring the collapse. I just turned on the lights." The lawyer stood frozen. He had no further questions. I stepped down from the stand. I did not look at Liam again. I walked out of the courtroom. I did not stay for the verdict. I didn't need to. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the federal courthouse and walked down the steps into the blinding afternoon sun. A swarm of reporters surged toward me, a wall of microphones and flashing cameras. "Ilara, how does it feel? Ms. Mason, what will you do now? What about the reward money? Ilara." I said nothing. I walked through them, their shouts just white noise. I felt nothing but the solid pavement under my feet. As I reached the curb, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a new phone, a new number, a new life. The message was a simple automated text alert from a bank. "A transfer from the United States Treasury has been successfully deposited into your account. A.M. Holdings." The reward. The number had 7 zeros. It was far, far more than $95,000. I looked at the text message for a single beat. It was just a number, an echo of a life that was over. I pressed my thumb to the screen, deleted the message without opening it, and put the phone back in my pocket. I raised my hand for a cab, and as it pulled up, I got in and moved forward, never once looking back. Thank you all for listening to this story. Let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.